February 7th, 1968. Green Berets at Lang Vei hear engines grinding through jungle darkness. No American commander believes enemy armor can reach this position. Then 11 PT-76 floating tanks emerge from the tree line. By dawn, the camp is effectively destroyed. A vehicle never meant to win, yet it shattered American certainty and changed the war. Soviet engineers at Khotin's bureau faced a problem that had haunted their armies for decades: how to get armor across rivers before the enemy could dig in. The answer was not brute force, but buoyancy, a sealed hull shaped like a shallow boat, welded from thin steel plates. At just 14 to 15 tons, the PT-76 weighed less than a third of a main battle tank. Its armor, 10 mm on the hull and 15 mm on the turret, would not stop a dedicated anti-tank round. But every kilogram saved was a kilogram that could float. The hull's geometry, flat-bottomed and flared at the sides, created a displacement envelope that kept water out and the crew alive. Twin water jet pumps buried in the rear could push the tank at 10 km per hour through rivers, no pontoons, no external floats, no waiting for engineers. On land, the same V12 diesel engine drove the PT-76 to 44 km per hour. But the real edge was underfoot. Ground pressure of just 0.048 kilograms per square centimeter. That meant the tank could crawl through marshes, rice paddies, and jungle trails where American armor would sink or stall. 3 crewmen worked in a space barely wider than a city car, the driver on the left, the commander in the turret, the loader to the right, each movement dictated by the need to keep the center of gravity low and the hull watertight. Every technical compromise, thin armor, cramped crew, limited firepower, was a calculated risk, traded for the promise of mobility where others saw only obstacles. The PT-76 was never meant to dual tanks. Its designers gambled on water, mud, and speed. What no one in Saigon or Washington understood was that, in the right hands, that gamble could become a weapon. How far could a tank with no business on the battlefield really go? In the spring of 1965, Soviet export crates labeled amphibious engineering equipment slipped across the docks at Haiphong under the cover of darkness. Inside the first batch of PT-76 tanks, serial numbers 4001 through 4012 waited in their shipping grease, destined for a war that official ledgers claimed did not exist. Soviet advisors operating under diplomatic cover supervised the offloading and reassembly. Their orders were to erase the evidence, blend in, train local crews, and vanish before American eyes found the pattern. The tanks moved inland by rail and convoy, hidden among construction machinery and agricultural supplies, then disappeared into the Mekong's labyrinth of rivers and trails. The official paperwork traced their journey only as far as the railhead, but Soviet radio logs and Vietnamese war diaries confirmed the handoff to the 202nd Armored Regiment, a unit formed in late 1964. Its ranks filled with officers who had spent 72 hours in Moscow learning to fight in the dark and cross water without a sound. The Americans saw what they expected: a terrain that swallowed armor, a war without tanks. Intelligence estimates dismissed the possibility outright, citing jungle density and monsoon mud as natural obstacles. But the 202nd Armored Regiment's PT-76s were already drilling for river crossings, rehearsing night attacks, and learning to disappear into the marshes. Each technical compromise, thin armor, cramped crew, and unremarkable firepower was offset by the one advantage that mattered: the ability to move where the enemy believed no tank could follow. By the time the first PT-76s rolled into the Red River Delta, the question was no longer whether they could reach the front, it was whether anything could stop them before they reached Lang Vei. Lang Vei, 2:30 in the morning. The jungle perimeter is silent, save for the rain and the low mechanical churn of water jet pumps. On the wire, North Vietnamese sappers work in darkness, with wire cutters, demolition charges, and blackened faces. They move fast, slicing through triple concertina and planting satchel charges with a 30-second fuse. The first breach opens with a muffled thump. In that instant, the lead PT-76 lurches forward, its hull slick with river mud, water still draining from the fenders. 11 tanks in total, hull numbers stenciled in white, emerge from the tree line, each crew drilled to silence radios, lights, and even engine revs until the breach is made. Sappers run alongside, guiding the tanks through gaps barely wider than the hull, clearing mines with bamboo poles and marking safe lanes with strips of torn cloth. The tanks move in pairs, headlights off, D-56T guns locked forward. Their armor, 15mm at the turret and 10mm on the hull, offers no comfort against a direct hit. But the calculation is simple. Speed and surprise are the only protection. The first PT-76 crushes a listening post, tracks grinding over sandbags. CIDG defenders scramble in confusion, firing M16 rifles and flares that illuminate nothing but steel and exhaust. The second and third tanks roll through the breach, one pivoting to fire a high-explosive round into a dugout, the other flattening a recoilless rifle position before the crew can load a shell. Sappers press forward, tossing grenades into fighting holes and pulling aside the last strands of wire. The tanks split, some swing left, others right, methodically rolling over bunkers and trenches, their hulls low enough to slip beneath the arcs of most defensive fire. Inside the camp, the defenders radio for armor support, but the only answer is static. In less than 5 minutes, the outer perimeter is gone, the inner wire tangled under the weight of amphibious armor that was never supposed to reach this far. The question hangs in the smoke. If 11 light tanks can breach a fortress in the dead of night, what else is possible in terrain the Americans thought was untouchable? The inner perimeter of Lang Vei did not collapse. It was flattened. PT-76 tanks, their hulls slick with rain and mud, pressed into the core of the camp. Bunkers built to withstand mortars simply caved in as treads rolled over them, crushing sandbags and men beneath. The D-56T guns fired point-blank into firing ports, sending high-explosive rounds ricocheting through earth and flesh. Captain Frank Willoughby, pinned near the command post, radioed for support that never came. His account describes tanks pivoting atop fighting holes, their engines throttling up as they ground the timber roofs to splinters. The defenders fired M72 LAW rockets, and some struck at shallow angles, skittering off the hulls or detonating harmlessly against the mud. Others hit square, punching through the thin side plates, but most failed to stop the tanks. The LAW warhead, rated for 90mm of penetration, was designed for Soviet armored personnel carriers, not for a moving, low-slung target in darkness and rain. In the chaos, 2 PT-76 tanks were destroyed. One took a direct LAW hit to the turret ring, igniting ammunition and blowing the hatch clear. Another was immobilized by a 106mm recoilless rifle, its crew killed as they tried to bail out. The rest kept moving. By 3 a.m., organized resistance had ended. CIDG defenders were dead, wounded, or scattered into the jungle. The final tally was 10 Americans killed, 11 wounded, and over 100 indigenous troops missing or dead. The tanks withdrew just before dawn, leaving the camp burning and the perimeter erased. The cost was visible in every crater and every bunker crushed beneath steel. The PT-76 tanks had not just breached the wire, they had rewritten what was possible in the jungle. The question now, how would American doctrine answer a threat it never believed could exist? ADA 562878 landed on the MACV desk like a warning shot. 11 PT-76 tanks had breached Lang Vei perimeter, and the paperwork made it official. The phrase critical breach of perimeter security appeared in black ink, stripped of euphemism. Within days, the bureaucracy responded. FM 3032B, the revised field manual, arrived with a new chapter, titled Anti-Armor Perimeter Planning, mandating anti-tank ditches, triple-layered wire, and kill zones angled for 76mm deflection. Every fire-based checklist now required engineers to verify tank obstacles. 3 concentric barriers, 6-foot-wide ditches, and reinforced bunkers. Weapon quotas were recalculated. No less than 4 M72 LAW, launchers, and 2 M67 recoilless rifles were required for every 200 men, with TOW missile allocations reserved for the highest risk sites. On June 15, 1968, MACV created the Anti-Armor Rapid Response Cell, AARRC, to audit firebases and oversee the urgent redistribution of anti-tank weapons. The clerical language hid a single, brutal fact. American doctrine had been rewritten by the tracks of a tank it never expected to see. The next question: could paperwork and checklists stop what steel and certainty could not? The PT-76's shadow stretches far beyond the jungle wire at Lang Vei. In December 1971, Indian PT-76 tanks from the 63rd Cavalry crossed the Meghna River under artillery fire, using their water jets to bypass destroyed bridges and flank entrenched Pakistani positions. The crossing, dismissed as suicidal by Western analysts, broke the back of resistance in East Pakistan and accelerated the birth of Bangladesh. In Angola, Soviet-supplied PT-76 tanks ferried MPLA infantry across the Kwanza's flooded banks, where tracked mobility meant survival in a landscape of mud and ambush. Iraqi crews drove the same hulls across the Shatt al-Arab during the Iran-Iraq War, trading armor for the ability to strike where armored columns were never expected. Even in Chechnya, Russian airborne units pressed battered PT-76 tanks over the Grozny River, gambling on water mobility against urban anti-tank teams. The blueprint persists. The Russian BMP-3 and China's ZBD-05 both inherit the sealed hull, waterjet drive, and low profile. Lessons were welded into steel half a century earlier. Each new vehicle claims better armor, more firepower, smarter electronics. But the core doctrine of mobility over protection and surprise over brute force remains unchanged. The real warning is not in the hardware, but in the logic. Every time commanders trust terrain to stop an enemy, someone finds a way to float a gun across. What river, marsh, or delta is being written off today? And who is already rehearsing the next impossible crossing? Armor just 14 millimeters thick, a 76 millimeter gun, and a hull designed for rivers, not showdowns. Yet in darkness and mud, certainty failed, and doctrine ruptured. Today, even precision armies underestimate what adaptation can breach. The next surprise won't announce itself. It arrives silent, floating, and uninvited. Share your take below.